Every day, you essentially pay your dues by doing the harder thing when it's the right thing to do.
Obviously, we know they're a good lower body strength builder. I mean, that's what we use them for, but they're so good for so many other things. Hip internal rotation that you need, but we never train in gymnastics because you're always trying to turn things out. Mm-hmm. Dorsiflexion, they're all pointing their toes all the time, walking around on high toe, that kind of thing. And they lose their ability to dorsiflex from never doing it. And so it kind of forces them in a low impact situation to work on those things so that when you get to the high impact situations, you land something short, you land something in a low squat, you're not in trouble because you've never trained it. Now you're strong at the bottom of that squat for those bad landings and just building up general strength to land safely. Any hinge pattern, but really deadlifts are probably the most common one. I think the one I use the most, and build around because it works as a piece of so many other things if you can get a good hinge. And that one, we need the strength there again in that movement pattern. But for me, getting kids to learn to hinge correctly and use it in strength training, it helps them learn so many other skills like back handsprings. I think if you use that hinge motion in a back handspring, one, it's a lot more powerful. Yeah. Two, we're now avoiding overstressing our low back by only bending there. Starting at the beginning of August, we're doing sets of 6 on deadlifts. And I change it by the week, how many sets we've got. We kind of build up and then we taper back off. So we've got sets of 6 on deadlifts. They have to add weight to every set. We don't really have time to sit there and warm up a deadlift and then find our working weight and then figure it out. So what I just have them do is just we load the bar to something that everybody can start with. And then from there, they add weight each set. And it's a good quick way to get them through it and still make sure that we're, overloading as we go. Mm-hmm. And then I'll usually pair a hinge with something else that I want them to learn that they need to hinge on that they may not think of. So maybe we're doing banded broad jumps with our deadlifts, or we're doing broad jumps all the way across the floor that go with it, something like that. And then I'll usually do it. The third exercise is something, if I've got something that requires a lot of jumping or is going to get their heart rate up, I try and bring it back down on the one that goes right before the deadlifts again. So right now they have a dead hang.
Yep.
So we're still doing grip strength, but they're relaxed a little bit. They're still working, but their legs are resting on that one. And that's kind of how I paired those 3 up. And one thing I think that it makes such a big difference if you actually understand the principles behind it is that what works for me in my gym and my setup is not going to work for every other gym. And so if I just feed you my perfect program and you're well, I don't have that and I don't have that and I don't have that, you're going to get frustrated and give up on it versus if I'm okay, you need this. It doesn't matter what implement you use, but you need something to add resistance and you need to go through these movement patterns and you understand why they're important and what movements in gymnastics they relate to. You can put it together in a way that makes sense for you.
Core work gets the most attention in gymnastics, but also it's probably the most misunderstood. There's definitely a benefit to leg lifts and compression work and stallers that's specific strength for gymnastics. But I think people generally just don't even understand how the core works and or what the core's main functions are. So when they see people doing farmer's carries or, bracing work or like deadlifting, for example, and knowing that's core work or sled work, it doesn't make sense to them. Why would I waste my time on a sled or a loaded carry when I have to do leg lifts? I just need 4 sets of 25 leg lifts and then half leg lifts and then full leg lifts and then compression leg lifts. And I'll be fine. I'll never have back pain and I'll have the best, kip cast handstand in the world. But can you imagine if more core work was all we needed for no back pain? No gymnast would have back pain ever, but
you'd be out of a job.
Staggeringly, it's I know exactly, right?
Leg lifts being so hip flexor dominant. And if you think of how many other things that are required to do good gymnastics are also hip flexor dominant, all of your split jumps and your leaping and all of this other stuff, and you're doing so much with just your hip flexors. And now you have kids who have hip flexor impingements and they've got just insane quad tightness in these different things. And it's because they're just using this one muscle group constantly for 4 or 5 hours straight during the day. And they're not actually making the things around it any stronger. And then you've got, now we're pulling on their lower backs because their hip flexors are so tight. Now we've got back problems because of it. And then you think you're making them better by adding more core exercise, but you're actually making it worse because you're adding the things that were feeding into it in the first place. And it just turns into a nasty cycle. And it's all well-intentioned. And that's the part that I think is hard for people. They're well, I'm trying to help them. And I know you are.
Yeah.
But slow down for a second. Xcel coaches being okay with having a slower timeline to get to the same place will help you a ton, because you do have fewer hours. But if you can make sure the kid has the basics and that they're strong enough for the skill and that they understand big concepts, whether it's like tapping or shaping or snapping or whatever that skill requires a lot of, they'll pick it up faster. Like, you can build the pieces of it. And then one day when they're ready, just be like, all right, try it. And like 9 times out of 10, I feel like they get it because they got all the building blocks along the way, even if they didn't realize it.
Yeah. There's so many important things popping into my head, like on this conversation. One is that if you build that culture around basics and strength, honestly, as those being like important parts of it, you learn skills faster. You can pick up stuff faster. You can have more fun. You can be safer when you compete.